Hey all, welcome back to the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today we have an amazing guest for our 20th episode, Mr. Meathead Goldwyn from AmazingRibs.com. I can't wait to get into our discussion with Meathead, so I'll be right back.
Smoking, grilling, getting hot and hotter, sous vide and chilling from fire and water.
Thanks for joining me again on the Fire and Water Cooking Podcast. I'm Darren, I'm your host, and today I've got a really special guest for our 20th episode here. I want to introduce Mr. Meathead Goldwyn from Amazing Ribs. Thanks for joining me, Meathead. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
I'm Meathead from AmazingRibs.com. And by the way, we never say Amazing Ribs. When you say I'm from Amazing Ribs, then I get phone calls at 10 o'clock at night asking if I deliver.
That's funny. So AmazingRibs.com. It is the biggest barbecue website, I think, on the internet. So.
Oh, it is. That's demonstrably true.
So you started this. How long ago was it when you first started AmazingRibs.com?
I launched it in 2005, I think. Yeah. It's an interesting story. I had a neighbor who was a retired butcher, and it's one of these things like the TV show. The two of us were talking over the fence, and he started ragging about how great a barbecue cook he was and how great his ribs were. And so I got pretty good ribs too. And we start chest thumping, and the next thing you know, we throw down, and our wives are going to be the judges. And so we set a date, and I come in, and I've got pretty good ribs, but I really had never gotten serious about them. So I immediately went to Amazon to see if there was a good book on rib cooking, and there was almost nothing on barbecue and rib cooking on Amazon. Believe it or not, in this world today, where there's like 10 new barbecue books a year, there were only 2 or 3 barbecue books available in 2005. At the time, I had just sold a business that was a wine website and a wine magazine. I was the wine critic for the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune. So I decided, what the heck? What'll I do next? Let's do a barbecue website and a book. And at the time, Amazon listed everything alphabetically, so I named it AmazingRibs.com, starting with an A, so that when I put out the book, we would be the first one on the list.
You should have named it AAA Aardvark.
Yeah, right. Aardvark ribs. Oh, dear. Boy, that was ancient times, man. I built the website myself. I learned HTML. I built the website myself. It started out with just one recipe, ribs, and then I put in some pulled pork, and then went on to bread. I got deep into it, and I've always had an interest in the sciences, and anybody who has visited AmazingRibs.com knows that we have a strong flavor of science, and our book is subtitled. Well, it's titled Meathead, but the subtitle is The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling. So that it all just took off after that.
So where did the nickname Meathead come from? Or is that your actual name? Your birth certificate?
I think it is my actual name. I'm an old fart. And back in the Archie Bunker days, now for the young listeners here, you may have heard of Archie. It was a TV sitcom, really a wonderful sitcom. And it starred a character named Archie Bunker, and his daughter and her boyfriend. I guess he was married to her. The boyfriend was Rob Reiner, and he was a flaming liberal, and Archie was an arch conservative. This was in the Nixon days, and they used to get in big fights over politics and race and religion. And Archie just called the son Meathead. And Dad and I had similar political alignments, and we got into arguments over politics. This is during the Vietnam War, and he just started calling me Meathead, just like the Archie Bunker character. He wasn't as bigoted as Archie was, but it just kind of stuck. And when I got into barbecue in the early 90s on the internet, you had to have a handle, you know? You had to have a nickname. So I chose Meathead, and it just stuck.
Well, it fits with barbecue. I mean,
Sure did.
you know, that's a perfect nickname for somebody who's into barbecue. So,
Absolutely, yeah. And it's worked well because this is, in this day and age, you got to have a brand. I mean,
right.
you look at Madonna or Lady Gaga or something. I got to have a. I just have more hair than them.
Yeah, and that's kind of like why I started Fire and Water Cooking. I mean, it's a brand people can understand that,
Mm-hmm.
Is sous vide and, barbecue, it's fire and water working together. That's, and
Mm-hmm.
I use the yin and yang symbol to, that brings them together,
Mm-hmm.
so it's great. So how did it all kind of snowball growing for you? I mean, when you started getting other people involved, like Dr. Blonder and Clint and all that?
Well, I launched the site in 2005 with, as I said, just the one recipe, and it started growing, but it was a sideline. I was building websites. I did my undergraduate work in journalism, so I was a reasonably good writer. I had written for the Washington Post and the Chicago Tribune, and I knew how to communicate with words. I did my master's in photography, and I'm a decent photographer. And here I was, a competent web builder. So I took these three skills and I started marketing myself to small to medium businesses, saying, "Hey, let me build a website for you. I can write it, I can photograph it, and I can build it." And as a demo, I created AmazingRibs.com to show on my own site something that I could do, combining all three skills. And it started taking off. In those days, there were no barbecue sites, like there were no books. And Google fell in love with it. Google started sending me traffic. And for a long time, we were really the only ones out there. Now, anybody with a grill and a keyboard has a daddy blog about barbecue and grilling. I mean, we've got hundreds of competitors out there, although they're really not competitors, not on our scale. And by 2010, there was enough traffic and advertising that I stopped doing web development for others, fired all my clients, and started working full-time on AmazingRibs.com. Within a few years, I hired Max Good. Max is our full-time grill and smoker tester. And somewhere along the line, Professor Blonder, he had just left AT&T, where he was head of research and development, and a physicist and an engineer with a strong interest in food science. And he had stumbled into the website, and we started corresponding. And I said, there's one thing that's always vexed me. That's the stall, the barbecue stall. And that's what happens when you do something like a pork butt or a brisket. You put it on the grill or on the smoker at about 225, and the internal meat temperature slowly rises till it hits about 150, 60, maybe 170, and then it stops. And it stops rising, and it stalls at that temp for hours. And if you're a rookie and this happens to you, you freak out because your spouse is in there, and the vegetables are ready, the guests are there, they're getting drunk, waiting for dinner to come to the table, and you're stuck at 170 degrees, and you want to take it up to 190, 200, and you just can't get it to go, and you crank up the heat. And now experienced people know about it, and they were combating it by wrapping the meat in foil, but nobody really knew what caused the barbecue stall. There was a lot of speculation. A lot of people thought it had to do with energy expended by converting connective tissue to collagen, or by rendering fat. So I asked Blonder what he thought, and he put his thinking cap on, and we developed a couple of experiments that he executed, and he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was evaporative cooling, that it was simply a matter of the moisture evaporating from the surface of the meat at the same rate as the warm air was warming the meat. So you reached a level of stasis where it was cooling at the same rate it was heating, and it wouldn't continue to rise on internal temp until the surface dried out. And when the surface dried out, forming the bark, then the meat would start going back up in temp. And that's why wrapping it in foil works, because you were preventing the evaporation. And he did series of experiments, and we proved that. And I remember I went to the Barbecue Brethren and I posted information about it, and they all shouted me down. You're an effing idiot. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. It's fat. It's collagen. And it was like, okay, I'm done with you guys.
Yeah. It's hard sometimes for people to wrap their heads around stuff that when they've been taught myths and traditions.
Well, that's part of the issue, you know. We all learn to cook from dad.
Right.
You know, just same way women learn to cook from mom. I learned to barbecue and grill from my dad. He had an old Weber kettle out back, and I'd stand there and he'd grill up flank steaks and maybe let me have a sip of beer, which made it more fun. And I learned all the myths from him. And when you start proving that bone-in ribeye is not better than boneless ribeye, that the bone has nothing to contribute to the flavor, people just absolutely refuse to believe you. When you try to teach people that the beer can in a beer can chicken does nothing to improve the flavor, they just don't believe you.
Yeah, I using that evaporative cooling that I learned from your website. One of the things when I do sous vide and barbecue, I take a spatchcock chicken, and I'll sous vide it to 148. Then I'll throw it on the grill, and the internal temperature of that chicken does not rise as fast as you would think, and it's due to the evaporative cooling, like you said, because the chicken is already at 148, so it takes it a lot longer for that internal temperature to rise. And people will go, oh, if you stick it on a 375 degree grill, it's going to rise right away, and you're at 300 degrees internal temp on the chicken. It's like, no, it takes it literally 45 minutes to an hour to even start rising.
Yeah, when you take food out of the bag, you have to decide what your next step is. If you're going to sear it like a steak, you need to pat it dry. Otherwise, the surface is just going to steam. It's not going to brown. You're not going to get the Maillard reaction. But if you're going to do what you just did, where if you want to get some smoke flavor on it, we've also proven that smoke sticks to wet surfaces. So you don't want to pat it dry. If you want smoke flavor, you want to leave it wet.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's basically what I tell people. And like you said, when you're trying to dispel some of these myths and traditions that people do, like mustard on a pork butt, you got to have mustard on it. No, you don't really, but if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But it's
I mean, mustard works great to help hold on the spice rub, but the flavor particles in ballpark mustard or even Dijon mustard are very, very few. And they contribute almost nothing. If you want a mustard flavor, go get Coleman's powdered mustard. Now you're talking mustard flavor. Sprinkle that on there. But
put it in the rub or something.
Yeah,
put it in the sauce. Exactly.
A jar of prepared mustard is mostly water or vinegar or both.
So let's talk and moving from that. So you built the website up before the book came out, or was it kind of in conjunction? Or
well, I thought when I got into this virility match with my neighbor that I would write a book, because since there were few, I said, well, here's an opportunity. I need to become an expert on ribs and write a book. So I start the website as a demo for my development skills. And also I figure I'll write a book on the side. And so I started gathering information, started doing research, and it just took forever for me to get enough information. And as I worked closer with Blonder, I realized how little I knew and how much misinformation, mythology was out there. So the book took until 2016 to come out. I actually spent maybe 3 years hard work on the book itself, but it was a culmination of 10 years or so of gathering information, learning, and writing. It was a labor of love. And I'm very happy with the book. It's almost 200,000 copies. I think only Steve Raiklin has surpassed that, and he's been, the king of barbecue books for years. It is one of the best-selling cookbooks on Amazon still. I think it's because it's different than most barbecue books in that the first half of the book is a science text. And a lot of the things that you and I are just discussing, we talk about in the first half of the book. What is fire? What is heat? What is smoke? What are meat science? And we get into all of this technology and science, hopefully so that you can understand it. I don't think it's too dense. And then the second half are recipes that apply the theory.
Yeah, I mean, that's my favorite part of Amazing Ribs and your book is that there's a reason for everything and why it works the way it does and how how smoke, works with meat and how the seasonings and stuff affect with the meat. So once you know the basics of that, you can do anything as far as cooking goes. So, I mean, you can create your own rubs. You can, you can try different things and experiment. Once you understand it, it's kind of hard to do that if you don't know how these things all interact with each other, Yeah.
Well, it's the old version. It's another version of the old saying, teach a man to fish or give a man a fish. Give a man a meal or teach him how to cook. And it's perfectly suited for this day. We are in a technological era. We're an inquisitive species. There are just an awful lot of people like you and me who, when we read a recipe, we want to know, why do I do that step 2? What happens if I don't do step 2? What happens if I increase the temperature? What happens if I leave out the sugar? And we want to know why, not just step 1, step 2, step 3, do what I say, march in time. And I think that's a trend now in all the culinary world. In the culinary world today, there's a nerdist movement. I mean, everybody knows about Alton Brown and Christopher Kimball. Our godfather is Harold McGee, the food scientist who wrote a book called On Food and Cooking. Shirley Corriher, who is one of Alton Brown's advisors. Kenji Lopez-Alt is my favorite. And he wrote the introduction to my book. We're all nerds, and this nerd movement is apparently got some legs. And I think that's a big reason why AmazingRibs.com and the book have succeeded.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be a secret. And that's one of the things I loved about. I had Harry Sue on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things he does is he tries to teach everybody. He doesn't hold back any secrets. I'm not going to teach you the stuff that I really, really know. He teaches you everything, and he just gives and gives. Just because there's no reason to have secrets in cooking. I mean, teaching people how to do things is what I love to do. That's why I started the website. And it's kind of sounds to me like why you started Amazing Ribs is to teach people, and that's a better thing than sitting here going, I know a secret on how to cook pork butter. I know I'd rather teach everybody how to do it. I don't know. That's just the way that I was brought up, to teach people what I've learned. So,
well, it's really gratifying too. There's not a day that goes by, and I'm not exaggerating, that I don't get an email or a post to the website or one of the social media sites saying, you've changed my life. That when I come home from work, the kids say, Mom, can Dad cook tonight? Or I got laid last night because of your recipes. And I get this stuff every day. I mean, some of them are really powerful. My dad and I used to barbecue together, and he's sick. He's dying of cancer. And for his last meal, I cooked your ribs, and he was so thrilled. Goodness gracious. That's heart-rending information, And when I was a kid, I was a pretty good student, and I thought that I would, change the world. I would, win the Nobel Prize or be a doctor or something. And when I got to college, I discovered I was not a lot smarter than anybody else. And when I got out into the work world, I discovered that the world wasn't changing much because of me. But I did discover, when I really got rolling with AmazingRibs.com, that I could change the world, that I was changing the world. I was teaching people how to cook and how to make their friends and family happy, one meal at a time. and that's changing the world.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing I love the most is cooking. I started cooking when very young, followed what my mom was doing. Then I worked in restaurants, when I was 16, cooking, and
Well, you got to start early.
I got started early, back when, the labor laws weren't as tight as they are now. So, and, I did that for the first probably 15 years of my professional career. Then I found I couldn't really, make a lot of money doing cooking, unless I wanted to work the crazy hours. So I got into banking, and that's what I've been doing. But I always loved cooking, and that's what I've done as a hobby. And my, family now, I do all the cooking. My wife doesn't like to cook. I cook all the
Really?
meals, and I love, having people over and cooking for multiple people and all that. So
Well,
I just, it's a passion of mine.
I'll
So
share a secret with you. I'm the second best cook in this house. My
that was
wife,
one of my questions. I was going to see how who cooks the most in your house. So
right now, it's my wife. I've been busy working on some projects that have kept me away from the kitchen, but I'm working on a new book. And any day now, I'm going to dive deep into the new recipes I'm working on, and I will kick her out of the kitchen. But she's been doing a lot of the cooking lately. Although last night I did some beautiful pork chops last night, so we share it.
well, that's good. But yeah, I started very young, and it's always been a passion of mine, and I like all different kinds of cooking, and not just barbecue. And that's kind of how I got the sous vide and the barbecue kind of mixed
Mhm.
together, because it's a new method to me. And once I got deep into how it could work together, it kind of, so light bulb came on, and I saw there wasn't a lot of people doing it. I mean, I saw some people every once in a while would have a sous vide and barbecue video out there, but they didn't really concentrate on it. It was just kind of something special. So I thought maybe I would kind of put it together and then show people and teach people how they can work together and get.
Well, it's a fun concept, and when you combine sous vide with grilling and smoking, you really can get the best of both. And in some cases, you can get better than both. I mean, one of the things that I'm sure you and your readers know is that when you take food out of the sous vide bag, it's butt ugly. And it doesn't have a crust, it doesn't have any Maillard reaction flavors. And you've got to sear it in some fashion, or you've got to brown it in some fashion, or you've got to smoke it in some fashion. And you can put all the herbs and spices you want in that bag. You can put all the butter and oil you want in that bag, and it's not getting into the meat. So you've basically, the sous vide process is simply a heating process and a pasteurization process. And it's after you're done with the sous vide process that you got to bring the flavor, and you've got to bring the treatments that will kick it up to something special. And the grill and the smoker are really good ways to do it.
Exactly. Well, we'll get deep into that on the second part of this, but right now I want to get into some more stuff about pretty much just barbecue, since that's your biggest the history. Let's discuss different styles and methods of barbecue. I'm sure that was one of the things that kind of opened your eyes. You go to different regions, and there's different, you got Memphis where it's all ribs and dry rub, and then you got, Kansas City where it's a mixture of everything, then Texas. So
Mhm. Well, I mean, I've traveled quite a bit, but more than regional styles, which I'm really into. I mean, I have a great interest in history and culture. Um, and, there's a reason mustard is popular in South Carolina, mustard sauces, because it was heavily populated by Germans. And Germans and pork and mustard go together like peanut butter and jelly. So there's history there, there's culture there. But what I'm really interested in teaching is the different styles of barbecue um, from a culinary or technical standpoint. One of the hardest things I have to get across is the concept that when you cook, you have three different heat sources. You have, first of all, warm air, which is a very slow, gentle cooking method. You have, and that's convection cooking. Then you have conduction, which is the hot metal from the grill grates storing energy and transmitting it and branding the surface of the food by storing high energy. And then you have infrared radiation, which comes from glowing red coals or flame. And how these three are different. One of the biggest hurdles I struggle with is with the Kamado crowd, in particular the big green egg people. And I'm going to insult some people out there. I hope they can take it like a man. But they run around and they say, my big green egg gets up to 600 degrees. Well, that's wonderful. That's warm air. But you really can't sear a steak unless you have infrared radiation. And infrared radiation is different than warm air. Now, you can also sear a steak with hot metal, with a frying pan. And we have the same problem on pellet smokers. They say, oh, my pellet smoker gets up to 600. But you can't really sear a steak on a pellet smoker because it's really a smoker. It's not a grill. You really can't get that dark crust unless you are directly over glowing red coals or flame. And you need to be close to it to get that sear. So it just doesn't matter. People ask us all the time, I need a grill that gets really hot. No, you don't. You need a grill that generates infrared radiation if you're going to sear. I can sear a steak better on a $30 hibachi than I can on a big green egg or a pellet smoker. And getting these concepts across.
I understand what you're saying, but you can do that on a Kamado. You just have to know how to do it. You got to get your grate down there by the coals. You're not going to do it with the lid closed and it's sitting up high. Yeah, I mean, you can get it. Yeah. If I get I have Kamado Joe, so I've got the divide and conquer, so I can move the grate. I can move the grate right over the coals, and that's where you need to be, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Even the divide and conquer is a good solution, but you still have that narrow funnel at the bottom, and it's not the same as a wide flat surface where you can. One of the real popular grills, like on the steak circuit now, is the PK grill,
right?
And here you've got the charcoal 4 inches below the surface, and you also, when you cook with grill grates, you get really good strong contact between the metal and the surface. So it's a difficult concept, and I've written about it. But again, it's like when we first explained the stall, or people just aren't buying it.
Yeah, and I noticed that at the Sous Vide Summit, and I've seen this on AmazingRibs.com as well. You showing people how to sear in a charcoal chimney, because it concentrates the heat right there. I mean, in that 8-inch around or 12-inch around circle, you got concentrated heat coming out like a jet engine.
Well, the real factor at play here is that if you have a single layer of charcoal, you have X amount of energy. And especially if you're using briquettes, each briquette is identical in the amount of energy. If you put 2 layers of charcoal, you have double the energy. If you have 3 layers of charcoal, 3 times. So in a chimney, you often have 7 or 8 or 10 layers of charcoal in a very concentrated area. A Weber chimney holds 88 briquettes. That's a lot of briquettes. And I think, 6 inches diameter? I mean, it's like the back end of an F-16. There's a picture of me standing in front of 3 of those chimneys. What we did is the Allen Brothers people brought a bunch of their strip steaks, and they sous vide'd the strip steaks to 135, which was a little more than I wanted to see because that's right on the edge of medium rare. But I took those babies, and they were only about 1 inch thick, and put them on top of the charcoal chimneys, and I did 500 of them in about 4 hours in 100-degree heat, standing behind 3 chimneys, emitting over 1,000 degrees each in temperature. I was one sweaty hot mother. I drank a lot of beer that afternoon, but I did 500 steaks that way. Got a spectacular sear on the surface of them because of all that concentrated energy. And that energy is not properly measured in degrees Fahrenheit. Like I was saying about, my pellet grill gets up to 600. It's really energy. And, here's the example that we need to, let's say you get your oven, your indoor oven, set it for 200. And when you get it up to 200, open the door and stick your arm in. You can actually hold your arm inside a 200-degree oven for, I don't know, a minute or two. I've never tried how long it is. You can do it. It's 200 degrees. Now put your hand on the side of that oven. Now that metal is 200 degrees, just like the air. But when you get back from the hospital, you'll understand that the metal stores and transmits more energy at 200 degrees than the air does. And so it's energy that we really are interested in when we're talking about cooking, not temperature Fahrenheit. And when you're talking about infrared radiation, when you're talking about glowing red coals or the sun beating down on the back of your neck, you're actually talking about calories. And we don't have calorimeters in our backyards, but it's the infrared radiation that we're really interested in when we're talking about searing. It was searing over, other than cooking in a hot pan. So it's a real, again, I'm back to that same concept of searing.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to take a little bit of a break here, and so I'll be right back. Hey guys, I just want to take a minute to mention Inkbird Barbecue Products. They're the sponsor of our podcast today, and they have their Bluetooth 4-probe digital barbecue thermometer, the IBT 4XS. Is on sale on Amazon right now for 20% off. Gets it to $44. It has a 500-foot range with Bluetooth. It works with your iPhone, Android device. You can monitor your pit temperature plus up to 3 different foods. Works great. Lots of options. Check it out on Amazon in the description below. I've got a link to it. Check out Inkbird. They have other products out there as well. Thanks for Inkbird for sponsoring the podcast. And now back to our show. All right, so we're back here with Meathead, and we're going to continue that discussion we were just talking about, because I want to go into some different types of barbecue and the difference between competition cooking and home cooking, especially because me and Clint had a couple, had a conversation about that when he was on the podcast as well. And one of the things that we talked about was that, competition cooking, what most people see on some of these barbecue shows, is totally different than what those guys do at home.
By the way, here's a scoop for you. I haven't told anybody but Clint. Should I get abducted by aliens or run over by a truck? I have named Clint first vice president and heir apparent. So one of these days he will be running the show, since I'm significantly older than he.
Well, he's got some knowledge, that's for sure. So
he does, and he's a fine cook and a great guy.
Yeah, he was. We had a really good discussion. I learned a lot from him. So, especially since he did most of the sous vide barbecue recipes.
Yeah. We about 3 years ago we talked a lot about sous vide, and I was tied up with some other stuff, and I said, "Well, why don't you become our resident expert?" And he actually knows more about it than I do. Although after I went to this conference, I'm ready to challenge him. So
cool. So what do you think, like I said, about the difference between competition cooking and home cooking and all that?
Well, I mean, competition cooking, you're cooking for judges who are going to get 1 or 2 bites at the most. So you can't be a delicate, simple, elegant cook. You've got to be a big, buxom, hit him in between the eyes cook. You got just a few seconds to knock them out of their chair. So the style of cooking tends to be very intense, very concentrated flavors, big, bold flavors, sweet, getting the sweet and the heat balanced. I mean, I've seen competition cooks put one rub on top of a rib bone and a different rub underneath the rib bone, because the underside hits the tongue and the upper side does not, or they put sauce on the top and rub on the bottom. I mean, they really are clever about the techniques they employ. And when you ask a competition cook, now Clint competes occasionally, I don't. But when you ask a competition cook, if they cook like that at home, they almost always start chuckling. Heck no. First of all, it's too much trouble. I mean, the things that they do, such as wrapping ribs in foil. I mean, it does help, but it's a very small amount. Maybe improves the quality by 10%, 15%. Well, I mean, if you got friends and family coming over 4th of July and you're doing 15, 20 slabs of ribs, trust me, you don't have to wrap them in foil and waste all that aluminum foil. They're going to be thrilled with them if they're not wrapped. And then all the injections and the multiple layering and the liquid margarine that they use and stuff. That's just a lot of stuff being done for presentation, and it makes it. I mean, when there's 10 grand on prize money on the line, you better do it. But it's a lot more than most of them are willing to do at home, and and for many, they just say it's just too big and powerful a flavor for serving for dinner. It's too much on the palate.
Yeah, that's kind of what we discussed. Even with Harry, it's you're cooking, like you said, for that one bite, trying to get noticed by the judge so that they can differentiate yours between the next guys that they're going to have to take a bite out of. And those people, those type of things you're not going to do. Like you said, you got 20 people coming over. You're not putting the margarine and 3 different kinds of honey and agave and injecting it with all kinds of this and using 12 different kinds of rubs, because you probably couldn't eat a whole rack of ribs like that without getting sick, because it's so sweet and
Yeah, and Harry is great. You've mentioned him twice tonight, and I'm glad you have, because he's one of my favorite people on earth. We were both guest speakers, the name stars at an event in northern, at the Angel Fire Resort in northern New Mexico a few years back, and we flew into Santa Fe from different directions, but arrived around the same time, rented a car and drove up there 5-6 hours, beautiful drive together. And we just spent a lot of time driving up there and then back and at the conference. And we really got to know each other. And I really got to respect his theory and philosophy of cooking. And I mean, he knows how to cook for the judges, and he also knows how to cook for family and friends. And they're not always the same thing.
No, he's the type of guy that you could, and I've seen him do this on some of his videos. You throw a basket like at Chopped, you throw a basket of food at him and you tell him, cook me something good in 10 minutes. He'll do it, because he's that good of a cook.
I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. I've been invited to compete on some of these shows and I decline. I get my butt kicked. I'm much more deliberative. I have to think things through. Okay, today I want to come up with something interesting to do with flank steak. Well, what hasn't been done? What kind of flavors might work with it? And I start noodling and thinking, I wonder how hoisin sauce would work on a flank steak. And well, that's going to be kind of thick and sweet. I got to cut it. Maybe I need some sort of acidity. What kind of acidity? And this will go on for hours while I'm trying to develop a recipe. I can't think on my feet like those competition cooks do. And so I turn it down when I'm invited. Plus, I've got everything to lose and nothing to gain. I have a reputation of being a good cook. And if I show up on one of these shows, I'm going to get my butt kicked and thrown off in the first round. And there goes my reputation.
Yeah, I've seen that happen with some. I think.
It just happened to poor Tuffy. Tuffy was on one of those there's no better competition cook on earth. And he just got kicked off in the second round of a TV show.
I saw Dr. Barbecue get it kicked in the teeth on the.
Yeah, he knows how to cook.
So yeah, it doesn't matter. Like you said, there's certain people that can do that. You throw a basket of stuff at them, and they can make anything out of it. So, all right, well, let's get into the sous vide and the barbecue, because your site's one of the only sites that I've ever seen that has sous vide Q on there, and that's kind of what got me interested in doing what I'm doing. Is when I saw that you guys had it on there, it made it more okay. Well, this is something that's got legs, because if Meathead's looking at it saying this has legs, it's got to be something. So that's kind of what got me started in doing this. And the more I get into it, the more I love it. So
don't try to blame me.
Well, and it is. You get some of the additional guys; they just can't wrap their heads around it, and it's like, they don't understand. Like you were talking about earlier, cooking with hot air and cooking with hot water is two different things,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
water transfers heat into the meat a lot better than air
Yep,
does. So,
yep.
and
Yeah, a lot of the traditionalists. You're a member of our Pitmaster Club, and you may be thinking of a member who shall go nameless, who's been showing up in all the sous vide discussions, and we're about ready to kick this sob out of here. We have the Pitmaster Club is such a wonderful environment. We just really stamp down any meanness, with plenty of controversy, plenty of debate, but no name calling. In my world, the name of the game is put great food on the table. And I don't care how you get it there. And if barbecue, grilling, sous vide, frying, I don't care what you do to get it there. And when sous vide first appeared to me, because I have a science interest, it caught my attention right away. It makes such interesting sense. The idea of cooking in hot air in an oven, or frying, or any of the normal cooking methods, is you cook food in something really hot. So it's like being on a train, and the train doesn't stop at the station. And so you have to jump off a moving train, and you've got to get that steak. If you want a steak done at 130 to 135, which is perfect medium rare, you got to jump off that train when the steak hits 130 to 135. The oven temp or the air temp or the grill temp may be 400 degrees or 500 degrees. You may have infrared radiation pounding it from all sides. You've got to figure out when to jump. And it's pretty easy to miss the station. With sous vide, you got a private chauffeur, and he drives you right to the station. He stops at the station, lets you off, and waits there for you until you're ready to go. You set the sous vide temperature to 131, and it just stays there. And you'll never overcook that steak because it can't go to 135. It can't go to 132. So that alone caught my attention. I don't know, maybe 7-8 years ago. But in those days, the home cooking tools were really expensive, and over the past couple of years, as you know, the tools have really come down in price. The Anova and the Joule in particular, those are the leaders with their Bluetooth and Wi-Fi connections, are both under 200, and some of them are down under 100 now, some of the models. So it's a technique, a tool that anybody can access. And we used to say we still do. We say on our website, if you boil ribs, the terrorists have won. And it's a fun motto, and people quote it everywhere. Well, this is not boiling. It's in a pouch inside the water. It's not in water. Boiling or putting food in water is putting it in a solvent. And water is a solvent. And when you take the ribs out of the water's brown. That's flavor that comes out. You're not doing that. The flavor is all captured in that bag. So, it's a very different approach, very different philosophy. And, one of the neatest parts of sous vide is if you're doing it, you got company coming, say 6 people coming over for dinner. You get stuck in the kitchen while everybody's out having cocktails and appetizers. You're in there getting the dinner ready. With sous vide, dinner's ready and it's sitting there waiting for you. You can be out there having cocktails and appetizers. There are just so many good reasons to cook sous vide. Plus the fact that, as any barbecue cook knows, low and slow means tender. At low and slow, you can melt connective tissues, you can render fats, and sous vide is the ultimate low and slow. I've heard it called redneck sous vide. Barbecue is called redneck sous vide because you're cooking low and slow. So it's got all of the right stuff there. The only downside is, and I've done this, and I don't know if you've done it, and I think maybe some of your readers have, is I've done side-by-side ribeye steaks. I've done one that I reverse sear, which is the redneck sous vide, and I've done one sous vide then sear, and the sous vide steak is more tender and more juicy The reverse sear steak is more flavorful. And so it's a trade-off. The sous vide steak doesn't quite have the richness and flavor that you get from the grill. It was a charcoal grill. Um, and the grilled steak, reverse sear, had more flavor, but it was still very tender. It was just not as tender and juicy. So it's like, what's your preference? Both techniques are really good, and both techniques are fun.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like to get people to think about is one doesn't replace the other. One technique doesn't replace the other. They're just two different techniques. I mean, I can take a brisket, or I just did beef ribs that I cooked, plate ribs for 134 degrees for 48 hours that I made them, medium rare. And it's how can you do that cooking it traditionally? You really can't. You got to cook it up to 200 degrees to get them tender. So you got to pretty much make brisket or beef ribs well done to make them tender. Even if you're braising them, you got to cook the meat till it's tender, and it's usually at the higher temperature. So
right, and medium rare beef is a different flavor sensation than well done. I mean, typically beef ribs, Texas style, you're going to cook them up to around 200 degrees. They are tan on the inside. They're full of flavor. They're tender and they're juicy because you've melted fat and collagen. But the muscle tissue is different because it's brown. You've turned all the myoglobin brown. Whereas if you do it at 134, as you did, you're going to get pink meat, and you're going to get the same tenderness and juiciness that you're accustomed to, but you're going to get a different flavor profile, and that's cool.
Yeah, and that's what I like about it. It's not replacing. I can still throw them on the grill and cook them traditionally, and if that's what I want to do, it doesn't replace. One method doesn't replace the other, and that's what I try to get through, especially the hard-headed people that, like you said, like the guy on the Pitmaster Club.
You know this guy? You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
No, I haven't really.
Oh, okay.
I usually, and I have a big Facebook group, and I get people that come in there joined to do that, that they come in just to try to poo-poo sous vide on anything. And they don't last very long because they show their face pretty quick. Well, they'll sit there and just go.
We don't have much of it. We average one person. We got 16,000 members, and we average 83% renewal rate. That's just unheard of. The American Medical Society gets 83% renewal. We average one person a year that we have to kick off, and this guy is this close to getting kicked off. But believe me, if you're thinking about coming in, we don't restrict freedom of speech. We just ask people to be no politics, no race, no religion, and be polite. And if you disagree with somebody, if you think your cooker is better, make your case with the facts. Don't tell people, you stupid idiot.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I follow too. You can have a grown up conversation with somebody. If you like it your certain way, nobody's going to tell you that it's wrong. I mean, because personal preference is a big thing. And I talked about this with Clint a lot too in our podcast, is you can't get around personal preference. And, if somebody likes their steak medium rare, that's great. If they like it well done, that's them. They're the one eating their food. You can't tell people how to eat their food. If it doesn't, you don't like it that way, then you don't have to cook it or eat it that way. But
well, of course, taste is a matter of taste. But I'll tell you on that very same subject, though, I have a theory, and I think I have seen it demonstrated, that one of the reasons people prefer well-done steak is they think the juices are blood. And as you know, we have harped on this subject for years. A steak is 75% water. Those liquids are not blood. The blood is removed at the slaughterhouse. That's water. It's pink because there's a protein called myoglobin that is pink tinted, and it tints the water. If it was blood, it would be the same color as your blood, which is really dark red, almost black. And if it came out of the meat, it would be thick and it would coagulate. These juices are watery, thin, and they're pink. It's pink water, myo water to be scientifically correct. And when you explain that to people, they almost always go, oh. And then I say, well, even if it was blood and you cook it to well done, where would it have gone? It would still be in there, wouldn't it? It's just that your well done is now brown. You would have you're converting the myoglobin to tan. That's what happens to myoglobin when it's overcooked. it goes from pink to tan. And by the way, that's also what causes the smoke ring. It's myoglobin. And when they hear that, I like to say, every time you call it blood, and I'm talking to you listeners, every time you call it blood, somewhere in Indiana, a bell rings and a teenager becomes a vegan.
I saw that. Saw Scott Hemmendinger retexted that from the sous vide summit.
Mm-hmm.
I like all
Yeah.
those little sayings that you have, because it's true. I mean, I know, and from my personal experience, my in-laws were like that. They liked everything just cooked to death because they thought everything in there was blood unless it was cooked to death. So, and you're right. I mean, people think that way, and it's just like the traditional barbecue guys, though. Some of those people, you're just not going to turn them around, no matter how much evidence or proof you can show that what they think is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, but exactly. So let's talk about the sous vide summit now, since we're kind of talking about sous vide. This is the first annual one. I was supposed to be there, but they invited me too late. I already had my schedule planned out for the year, but I hopefully will be back.
You need to be on the speakers podium for the next
Yeah,
one.
I was supposed to be on I was supposed to be on it this year, but like I said, by the time Mike and Jason asked me to be on, I'd already had my schedule planned out and I couldn't fit it in. So I'm definitely going to be in San Francisco
next year, and you don't have to twist my arm to get me to go out there. It was the first ever, to my knowledge, sous vide conference anywhere. They had I don't know the exact numbers, about 200 people in attendance. They were about, again, they asked for people to raise their hands. I think there were about 60% home cooks and about 40% restaurateurs and caterers and things of that sort. They had a really good lineup of speakers. They ranged from me talking about sous vide Q and to a woman who writes a column, Will It Sous Vide, from Life Hackers, and she's tried to sous vide everything under the sun. They had some scientists, they had some instructors, and they actually, for a first-year conference, they had an exhibit area. There weren't a lot of exhibitors, but there were some cool new pieces of equipment on exhibit there that, like these tubs for holding the sous vide and racks to keep the food separated when you got like 12 steaks and you're trying to sous vide them and you don't want them laying on top of each other. You want liquid in between them. They had sous vide machines. They had vacuum machines. And it was just a nice event. And the meals were nice. Unfortunately, they ran into some sort of silliness with the hotel we were at where they couldn't cook for us. I don't remember all the problems. So we had to go off premises to a nearby park where they had, and it actually wasn't nearby. It was like a 40-minute bus ride where they did all the meals. But the meals were stunning. The food was stunning. And I will say that with no small modesty that these Allen Brothers steaks that I cooked were a big hit. And some of the other fun things, one of the guys did tomato. It was skinless, just the flesh part, and it was trimmed like almost like a football shape and laid on top of sushi rice. So it looked like salmon on rice, but it was a tomato that had been sous vide, and it was fantastic. There was some other fun stuff going on. A lot of good seminars. It's a really good event if you're into sous vide. They have announced next year's conference in San Francisco and the dates. You should look them up and go.
They're in August. I'm going next year. I already told Mike and Jason I'd be there, and it's going to be close to Anova's headquarters. And I think Kenji's going to be involved in it too this year. Because Kenji, I think his schedule was tied up this year too, is why he couldn't attend. So some of the people that are on the board that should have attended weren't able to, and I think that's going to be different next year. So Kenji's right down the street. So
Yeah, he's in San Mateo. Kenji has opened a restaurant in San Mateo. I was out that way recently and visited the place, and it's a fun place.
So yeah, I think that they had a really good response to that. There was a lot more than some people thought. That, that's being the first one. You never know how it's going to go, but I've heard a lot of positive feedback about it, and I think the next year is going to be even bigger. So, and it was great to have you out there. I know that they really enjoyed your speaking and getting into that, because that's one of the things I want to do is show people that sous vide is just not for steaks or chicken breast or seafood. I mean, there's so much you can do with it, with the sciences behind it, that it's not just how to cook a steak, medium rare from end to end. There's a lot more you can do with it. So
Yeah, and that's one of the things that the first thing anybody does when they get a sous vide machine is they go out and get a ribeye and they throw it in there, or an egg, and that's all well and good. But of course, the real beauty of the sous vide machine is that you can put a piece of rump steak or flank steak, a tough cut, into the sous vide machine and turn it into something as tender and juicy as a ribeye. So that's the cool
yeah,
thing.
that's my wife's favorite thing that I make sous vide is I take top round, which is, people
Mm-hmm.
call it London broil, whatever. It's just really a tough steak unless slice it really thin and all that. But you can
Mm-hmm.
put that in a sous vide bath for 36 hours and it comes out as tender as a fillet. I mean, she loves it. I mean, she doesn't like a lot of fat on her steaks. She's not like me. I like a ribeye just like anybody, but she doesn't care for a ribeye. But I'll throw a top round steak in there for 36 hours and cook it medium rare, and she'll love it.
Now, when you say a top round, are you going with how thick a piece of meat is this?
1.5 inches. So it's more the thinner cuts.
Hmm. I've got to try. I have not done top round, and 36 hours for a steak is longer than I would normally do it. But I got to do that.
But yeah, that's chuck roast too. I mean, chuck roast is one of my favorites, and I do that at or tri-tip at 134. I'll do a chuck roast at 36 hours at 134. If you go up to 134, it kind of renders more of the fat, and it just turns out amazing. So it's pretty much like a ribeye. It's kind of like a chuck eye steak, which you get you do it at that longer, lower temperature at a longer time. It tenderizes it to where you couldn't tell a difference, from a chuck eye steak on it. So
Fantastic. Yeah, there's a lot of fun experimenting. And one of the experiments you can do is you can do just what you're talking about. You can take a top round and do it for 3 hours, do it for 6 hours, do it for 12 hours, do it for 24 hours, and taste them and see what you like best.
that's one of the things too I like to in my groups and stuff, because it's hard for people will take sous vide and try to cook something one way at one temperature at one time, and then just say, well, it didn't turn out the way I want it, so I'm not going to try it anymore. And it's like, well, there's so many different ranges on time and temp and sous vide that you can adjust to make it to where that it's perfect for you. So you can't just cook it, 131 for 8 hours and that's it, and then say, well, it came out crappy, I don't want to do it anymore, because you can't do that with any cooking method. But sous vide, it's you can do so many different things with the times and temps that you can have a totally different result.
That's a really good point, and I'm writing a document, a PDF, which you saw a draft of, about sous vide Q, which is the term that we coined when we started writing about sous vide on our website. And I like the ring of it, sous vide Q. And so I'm doing a document which is an introduction to sous vide and then dives deep into such things as safety. And we have some really interesting new data on pasteurization temps, and then into combining fire and water in sous vide Q. And I'm trying to provide some rules of thumb for cooking times and temps, and I'm struggling with it because they're really across the board, and it's really hard to say, well, 90 minutes per inch, because it can really vary per cut, and it really, as you said, varies for your preference.
Exactly. And then that's what I try to tell people, try it several different ways. And then when you lock into the way you like it, then keep it that way, you know? So it's
Yeah, one of the problems is a lot of people don't like to
right.
experiment.
Exactly.
A lot of questions, like, okay, I'm going to do this. How long should I cook it?
Well, even in barbecue,
And
it's like that. You know, they want to know
yeah,
what's the exact temperature and the exact time where it's going to be done. And even with
hmm
barbecue, you can't do that because you can have a brisket, be done at 202 or 203, or you can have a brisket be done at 195. So all
hmm
depends on the hunk of meat. So it's really all depends. It's done when it's done. On that as far as that goes. All right, so let's talk about a couple other things before we wrap it up. I want to talk about the Barbecue Stars video series that you're doing, that you're involved in. I think it's probably going to be past the time for registration, but if you said, I think you told me they might have some kind of a special registration period afterwards. So let's talk about that, because I know you and Harry Sue are part of that, and so is Tuffy Stone and a couple others.
Yeah, this is a really interesting concept. Some people may have heard of the Masterclass series. There's this wonderful program called Masterclass, where you can sign up for a class on directing film with Steven Spielberg, or playing cello, Yo-Yo Ma, or Aaron Franklin from Franklin Barbecue doing barbecue. And you pay fee and you get really great production values, really well managed, well directed. Well, this other company has just launched a series called Barbecue Stars with more than just Aaron Franklin. They've got Tuffy Stone and Harry Sue and me and Ariane Dogan and Dave Buska and the guys from the State Cook-Off Association and from Meat Church. Kent Rollins, the cowboy cook. If you've never seen him on YouTube, he is fantastic. His specialty is cast iron and chuck wagon cooking. And they've got 11 really good barbecue and outdoor cooks. And each of us filmed about 10 segments. I did 10 recipes, and I think there are another segment or two of other subjects. And they're going to start releasing them in September. We just got done filming, and they're editing now. And so they have open registration that runs through the 29th of August, and then they're closing the registration. But they've told me that they probably will open it again for a few days in September. It's $297, but you get unlimited access to these videos. You can watch them, replay them anytime. The production values are really high quality. They sent out a professional production team from Tulsa, and I spent a whole day preparing for it and 2 whole days taping it, and got some really good stuff. It should be a lot of fun. I'll be announcing it if they open it again on social media, on Twitter and Facebook, and also in the Pitmaster Club. So take a look at, I'll give you the URL. Go to tinyurl.com/BBQ stars. tinyurl.com/BBQ stars. And you'll get the whole lineup and all the recipes and see some video, and you can get your name on the mailing list, and they'll let you know when they open up for registration again.
I'll put that down in the description as well, so people can click
Great,
on that link.
great.
So yeah, that sounds really interesting. I'm really excited about it. I'm hoping to go ahead and do that as well. And I've been so tempted to get on the masterclass one, not just for Aaron Franklin, but for you got Thomas Keller's got 2 on there. You got Wolfgang Puck's got one on there, and there's a couple others.
Right.
There's a couple others on there. I'd like to.
Alice Waters is there. I've signed up for it.
Yeah.
I've been taking Thomas Keller's classes and Alice Waters' classes.
Yeah.
I haven't dipped into Wolfgang Puck yet, but there are a couple other things that are interesting to me. As I mentioned, I'm a photographer and a writer, so I'm going to take some of the classes on writing and photography.
Yeah, that's you're like me. You're not just interested in just barbecue. Just barbecue's a passion, but I love cooking all over, all kinds of different cooking methods. So, Thomas Keller and Wolfgang Puck and even Gordon Ramsay, they kind of, some of the things that they do, they make look simple, you know. So it's a very interesting project, and this barbecue star sounds like it's going to be great as well.
Yeah, I'm really anxious to see the final product. I know my segment should be really good because, you know, you know when you're having a good day and when you're having a bad day, and as I get older, I have more bad days than good days. But I was rocking it. I knew I was on. I was glib. I was extemporizing well, and it just fired on all cylinders for me.
Really looking forward to that. And then there was another thing that I got since I'm a Pitmaster Club member. If you guys aren't a Pitmaster Club member on AmazingRibs.com, you need to do it because it's not very expensive and it's very, very informational. The Pitmaster Club is a lot of information on there, a lot of people on there talking about barbecue and loving barbecue. So, but you just announced, like last week, I think it was you're going to have a Pitmaster conference in Memphis.
Yeah, we are calling it the Meetup in Memphis. There is a conference every year for the barbecue trade for restaurateurs and caterers and competition teams run by the National Barbecue Association. But there is no conference for consumers. And we have the largest consumer organization on earth, the Pitmaster Club, 16,000 members. So we decided, what the heck, let's get them together and have some fun. A lot of members of our Pitmaster Club are virtual friends. I mean, they know each other. They know about their families. They know when there's a new baby. They know when there's a new grill. They know who's into sous vide and who's not. And there's virtual friendships. It's a real community. So we've decided we're going to have a meetup about a year from now. It's going to be in Memphis. We'll start off on Friday with a dinner, and it's July 31st to August 2nd. Yeah, last weekend in July. We're going to have a whole day of conference at the Peabody Hotel, one of the great hotels in the country, grand old hotel in Memphis. And it's going to be pork-centric. Memphis is pork-centric. We're going to have some interesting breeds of hog to taste. We're going to have a couple of presentations on pork and the state of the pork world and the new breeds and experimental breeds and cooking pork and cuts of pork. And then we're going over to Beale Street, which is just a block away, and we're going to party away the night. And then the next morning, we're boarding the buses and we're going to hit the barbecue joints. So it should be a lot of fun. The meetup in Memphis, and you can just go to AmazingRibs.com, and on the site you'll see a blue promotional box, an ad for it. Click on that, and you'll get the whole itinerary, and you can sign up and join us in Memphis. Even if you're not a member, you got to join, but it's only $24 a year, and your membership it'll pay for itself. People really like, as I say, 83% renewal. So go check out the meetup in Memphis. It should be a lot of fun. I'm going to be there, as will be the rest of our team, and I'm looking forward to it a great deal.
Yeah. So is it something you're going to do every year if this goes over real well, or is it something?
We hope so. I would like to do it. Year 2, go to Kansas City or Austin. Year 3, go down to the Carolinas. Maybe do Santa Maria, Chicago. Hit all the great barbecue towns. Punch your passport.
Yeah, take it up to Canada and then go all over the place. Why not? Right. All right. Well, I want to thank you for joining me. We got a lot of had a good conversation. Got a lot of good information. If you need to check out AmazingRibs.com if you've never been there. If you've never looked at the Pitmaster Club, like Meathead said, $24 is nothing for the information and everything you can get out of that. Check it out. I'll have all that in the description down below. I'll also have the description the information about the Barbecue Stars video series.
Yeah, and if you're interested in getting this PDF that I'm writing, I'm almost done with it, on Sous Vide Q. send me an email. Just say, send me the article or the PDF you're doing on sous vide Q. Just send it to meathead@amazingribs.com and I'll send it to you.
Okay, well, I'll put that down in the description as well, so they have your email. And
well, you've seen the first draft, and I'm polishing it now. I think it's pretty good.
Yeah, I looked it over, and it looks really good. Lots of good information on there. A lot of stuff that I tell people, especially on the barbecue meats and stuff, to put it on the smoker wet. Some people don't understand that, and what you're trying to do when you're smoking, it's not what you're trying to do when you're trying to grill. You're trying to capture that smoke, and if you put something on, if you put it on wet, there's more chance that you're going to capture that smoke. And then it's just like spritzing. I tell people spritzing is not to keep the inside of the meat moist. It's to build smoke profile. It's like painting on, a smoke layer, because it dries, and then you got paint, just like paint. You let it dry and you put another coat of paint on. That's what it does when you spritz a brisket or a pork butt. So, well, thanks again, Meathead. I appreciate you coming. Hopefully we can have you on again sometime, and hopefully I'll get to meet you in person up at the sous vide conference next year in San Francisco.
I'm looking forward to it. I'd like to meet you.
All right. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. And make sure you guys join us on the next Fire and Water Cooking podcast. Well, thanks again for joining us, everybody. I want to thank Meathead Goldwyn one more time for being on. Make sure you check out the links below to amazingribs.com. Check out the Pitmaster Club. Check out the link to his book that's on Amazon. Also, check out the link to Barbecue Stars. That's also below. Make sure you also shoot him an email and ask him for the PDF for sous vide Q that he's been working on. And as soon as he's done with that, he'll email it out to you. Make sure you check out Inkbird, who is the sponsor of the podcast. And thanks for following us. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Fire and Water Cooking podcast.